Hello and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown. With me is my original partner in crime and all things when it comes to Big 12 Mafia. That would be the Wild Ute. How you doing today, Ute?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing? How you doing, Bomber?
I'm doing okay. It was a good weekend. Yeah, Friday wasn't my greatest day, so I'm glad to have another week to go at it again. And I'm really excited for this short. We want to thank everybody for joining us. This is the first episode of Wild Ute University on the Big 12 Mafia Show. Ute has put together the highest quality shorts that I've seen anywhere on the internet, especially on YouTube. And we want to thank for him for all that work that he's done in the past. And as we continue to do things, this is going to be something that we do continually as we add more products to the Big 12 Mafia brand. So, Wild Ute University is going to be a first episode, and I think this is a good one. Why don't you
Oh,
kick
yeah.
off exactly what we're going to be talking about here, Ute?
Yeah, we're going to look at Florida State University and how it fits into the Big Ten Conference. And if it does fit into the Big Ten Conference, this is a big one, y'all. I mean, really, this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg here. So this is does it fit Florida State in the Big Ten Conference? So we're really going to hone in specifically on the brand, what Florida State brings brand-wise to the Big Ten, and how that stack ranks with other Big Ten schools. So the approach here is a 5-point approach based on what we thought was a good way to evaluate this. We're going to look at 5 different things, okay? Historical success on the football field. We're going to look at recruiting perception, high school recruits perception. We're going to look at actually recruiting results, viewership figures, and the financial results of Florida State versus Big Ten schools in key areas that we can look at how strong the brand is. Then after all that's said and done, we're going to look at the stack ranking to see where Florida State stacks up versus the rest of the Big Ten schools. So let's start here historically. This is the first metric we're looking at. This is this is called the Blue Blood ranking. If you've ever heard of the Blue Blood ranking, it's from It's from Winsipedia, and it provides information like all-time winning percentages for each football program around the nation, national championships, and it uses a formula to produce everything here. So Florida State, just for some summary here, Florida State has 3 national championships, weeks at number 1, 72 weeks at number 1, and Heisman winners, they have 3. And when you factor all that in, along with its win percentage and other bowl wins and everything else, it actually stack ranks 6th in the Big Ten. You can see to the right-hand side of the screen, USC would be number 1 in the new Big Ten as far as the blue blood percentage, the blue blood rank in the Big Ten. This is just looking at Big Ten teams. This isn't across all of college football, but in the Big Ten, USC would be number 1. Florida State measures at number 6. So keep that in mind there, because what we're looking at here is if Florida State brings above average brand value to the Big Ten. And when you're looking at 19 total schools, so currently the Big Ten has 18 schools, plus Florida State brings it to 19, you're kind of looking at a bar around team number 10. In this case, it would be Michigan State. That's kind of the midpoint, saying, okay, that's the average Big Ten team. That's the median right there, Big Ten. So if Florida State measures in the top 9, they'd be above average, yeah, compared to the rest of the Big Ten. So as far as historically in the blue blood rankings, Florida State is number 6, right between Penn State and Washington. So check with number 1 for historically in the blue blood rankings. Now
I
let's
think
move
it's
on.
interesting that USC is number 1 in the blue blood ranking,
Right.
but if you were to talk about them today, they might not even be 5th. It just shows you how far down that program has fallen.
If no doubt about it, and like this brings in all of the results from, even ancient history of 50, 70, 80 years ago.
Right,
There's a
right.
period of time, in the 70s when USC just dominated. They were winning national championships. They were number 1. They had a bunch of Heisman winners, All-Americans. So the blue blood model loves USC. USC is actually number 1 overall, I believe, right next to Alabama, number 1,
Really?
right?
Okay.
And then Ohio
Wow.
State's at a few down, I think, in the national spot, like around 5 or 6. But you can see USC brought a lot to the table to the Big Ten, as does Florida State. Yeah, but let's
Fantastic. I
let's move
love it.
on. All right, here we go. So perception here. What this means is recruiting perception. And there was an article produced by 24/7 Sports last year that interviewed 1,000 different recruits around the nation that were being recruited at that given time and asked them, okay, list out the top 25 brands based on your own perception as a high school kid, as a good high school recruit that's being recruited by multiple schools. And based on that composite of 1,000 recruits, there were 25 teams listed, and 9 of those teams, if you include Florida State, were actually in the Big Ten. Uh,
Wow.
and so you can see here, number one in the Big Ten. This is just looking at Big Ten teams. Again, we're not throwing in the SEC teams or anywhere else. But Ohio State has the best brand perception in the eyes of high school recruits, followed by Oregon, which is extremely surprising in this new Big Ten conference. But Florida State would actually stack rank fifth in the entire Big Ten conference. And then most surprising of all, I think, would be Maryland. Maryland made the top 25,
Right.
brand perception from high
Right.
school recruits here. And if you don't see your Big Ten team on here, it's because they weren't listed in the top 25 based on those high school recruits. So they would fall out of the top 25. And there wasn't like 100, like the top 100 brands for the high school kids. It was just the top 25. So really, we're only looking at the ones that were actually considered based on the high school recruits here. And these are the 9, including Florida State, Big Ten teams. And Florida State, finds its way again in the upper echelon of the Big Ten as far as a brand perception wise from high school recruits. And to me, this is massive information. And like we're talking about brand, like Bomber, you and we've followed college football for a long, long time.
Right.
But like, what are the younger kids, like the kids that are actually playing football? What do they think? Like, not what do we think, but what do they think? This is what that tells us. Like the brand's just not, with the guys that have been watching for 25 years in our
Right.
perceptions, but these are the younger kids. And Florida State is an above average brand. They're sitting here written fifth in the Big Ten.
It's ahead of USC. No
Right?
surprise it's ahead of UCLA. In fact, I'm surprised UCLA is that high,
Hmm.
but you have no Washington on this list. Um, and boy, oh boy, where in the world are you gonna? How are you gonna promote your brand if you can't even get in front of Maryland? I mean, that just shocks me. That Washington isn't ahead of Maryland because Michigan State, Maryland, what have they? UCLA, what have they won recently? It
Right.
just blows
Hmm.
me away.
And this was based on going into last year's football season. So you wonder, like,
Okay,
with Washington getting to the national championship game, if that might give them some lift.
right?
Maybe so. With them, losing Kalen DeBoer and then
Yeah,
bringing Jed Fish in too. Like, I don't know how that factors in, but before the football season started, these were like the 8 Big Ten schools plus Florida State that makes the 9 in
that is
the top
crazy.
half of the Big Ten. So Florida State again, when you're checking this off, like, okay, they check that brand value here for recruit perception.
Wow.
But let's move on to the next. All right, here is just straight recruiting results here. So this matters too, as far as your brand perception, because this is actually the high school kids. They might say that you got a good brand, but then this is them saying, okay, I'm going to play for your team and your coach
Right.
in this brand too. So this is based on the talent composite. So this is how much talent is on each roster going into the 2023 season. The 2024 information isn't quite out yet. It will be out for the football season next year. So this is the most recent information we have available. But this just tells you how talented each roster was of each one of the Big Ten teams. You throw Florida State in here too. And the
Wow.
guys, to keep in mind again, that number 10 spot where Michigan State's kind of sitting at right there, that's the midpoint. So you want to be above that to be considered above average brand of the Big Ten. Ohio State has had the most talented roster going into the 2023 season. Michigan was fifth, but Michigan won the national championship
Right.
in the Big
Well,
Ten.
with
Right?
blue shaded glasses on some referees and stuff. Yeah,
With
I
some
would
Connor
say.
Stallion help too,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But yeah, Michigan was sitting at 5 as far as the most talented Big Ten roster. Florida State was right behind them at 6, and look at that, Washington was sitting at 9 in the Big Ten as far as the most talented roster, slightly above that midpoint. And both those teams made the national championship. So you don't necessarily have to have the most talented roster, but these are some of the best rosters around the nation too. When you're looking at Ohio State, USC, Oregon, and
Again,
Florida's
Nebraska and UCLA, that blows me away. It just shows you they're underachieving by a
big
large
time.
margin. Right.
Nebraska is so underachieving. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at FSU, though, to the Big Ten, it's like another check, though. They're just
Right.
above average. They're checking off everything here as far as comparing the brand to the average Big Ten team. So
Excellent.
we're sitting at 6 here. So let's move on. All right, this is where it gets a little bit different, and wanted to break out some more deeper analysis into like, okay, when we're talking about brand, it's not just about recruits, it's not just about your history, it's really about like your actually the money you're making as an athletic department. And so Sportico has athletic information from each athletic department that provides specific information about what revenue, what sales sources are coming into the athletic department. And the areas that I really wanted to hone on were not media rights value because Florida State
Right.
has a lot less because of the ACC currently. But I wanted to look at, okay, ticket sales. How much are you getting from your stadium ticket sales? How much are you charging? Because that could show you some brand value. Definitely your licensing and ad revenue that you're getting out there, like Florida State merch and everything. What's that selling at? How much are you making from Florida State merch? And there's this figure that was known as like this miscellaneous figure that I think was like a catch-all too, that I wanted to include in the analysis. So here you include the miscellaneous revenues, the ticket sales, and the licensing and ads. And you guys can see this all color coded if you want to look at how your team or how a team's stacking up versus others, and just seeing what kind of revenue these athletic departments were producing to kind of give an indication of the brand value. And of course, like Ohio State's sitting at number one, just based on the miscellaneous revenue, the ticket sales, and licensing, they almost produced $125 million in revenues
Wow.
in 21-22, and that's the most recent information available. For these athletic departments, then Michigan was second, Penn State was third, and Florida State sitting there, and what spot is it? So they're sitting there about seventh spot. And then that's in the ACC currently, like right next to Washington, who was in the Pac-12, based on this information too. But you can look at that information, and the one that's really intriguing, maybe the most intriguing to me, is the licensing and ads bar, and that's the blue bar. You can see how Florida State's merch, their ad revenue is kind of going compared to other brands, and it's pretty high
Right.
if you just look at that blue bar. I mean, it's almost kind of stacking with Ohio State, and that gives you a really good indication about your brand. Like, hey, like nationally, are people buying your stuff? Do they care
Right.
about your stuff? Are you selling ad revenue to different advertisers? Are you on commercials or whatever? Like, there's a lot of stuff that can go into that, but that's a really good telltale. And the ACC, they're making pretty good money based on their licensing and ads. And Bomber, just imagine when they're in the Big Ten conference with us
I
combined,
know. I know. I
right?
know. Yeah.
Talk about upside. And
Big time.
again, Florida State is above that kind of median average and everything based on what we're looking at. I mean, they're kind of more near the middle. But again, the ACC factor is kind of playing in here too. So there's probably a lot of upside financially. But even based on the financials, the indication is that they are above average as far as a brand in the Big Ten.
Do you know where USC is?
So USC and Northwestern aren't on this graph
Oh,
because
okay.
they're private schools.
Oh, right. Of
All
course.
of these are public schools right here, so they're gonna
Right.
be, 17 schools out of the 19, including
Okay.
Florida State listed. But Northwestern and USC, we don't have that information available in any source and everything, so their data was omitted from the specific graph.
Okay.
And,
Yeah. Very fair.
yeah, so
Next.
yeah, let's keep moving on.
Okay.
And this is the one that we all know and love talk about is the viewership numbers. This is based on Sports Media Watch information. That's the Paulson data about
Wow.
what how what's the average eyeball on your football game,
Oh my
and this is
goodness.
over the 21 to 23 seasons. And you can see there's a little footnote at the bottom of this graph too. Paulson information, Sports Media Watch information, does not include information, the viewership information from the ACC network, the Pac-12 network, or
Oh,
Peacock.
okay.
So Florida State, Washington, USC, they're going to be a little bit lower, artificially lower, because all the games that were on the ACC network and the Pac-12 network got a zero figure. That's kind of
Right.
getting thrown into these numbers, so it's bringing those down a little bit. But this is important because you're looking here, like when you're talking about like historical brand value, everyone's thinking viewership. How much viewership do you bring to the table as far as football television viewership? Notice Ohio State is very strong. You're looking like over 5 million people watching an Ohio State game on average over the last 3 years. Bomber, that's
That is
insane, huh?
insane. Absolutely insane.
And so you're looking like at Florida State here, and Florida State's actually fourth. That's being
Right.
in the ACC here, and like they're yielding over 2 million viewers per game. And like, and again, the question is, like, and look at Oregon sitting right next to them, and that was the Pac-12. Like, what are these brands like in Oregon and a Florida State? What are they going to yield when they're on the Big Ten network and they're getting all that information thrown into these numbers and they're playing versus Ohio State, Michigan?
Right.
Dang, they're gonna grow significantly. There's a lot of upside with viewership, and they're already sitting at 4. They're
Right.
already sitting at 4, so
Right.
I would say that Florida State's numbers are very good, when you're looking at viewership, when you're stack ranking it versus, like, the existing Big Ten, and they're gonna get even better, and more numbers are gonna be included that when you're actually factoring in if they were on the Big Ten network, even on the lowest end games, so I think that's a very promising thing for Florida State when stack ranking the brand value compared to the average Big Ten team. So that's a big win for the Knowles as far as viewership.
Agreed.
Okay, so to finish this off, let's go to the next. This is the last, and this is the overall stack ranking of Florida State's brand compared to the rest of the Big Ten schools. This is considering all the data. It's pretty simple, kind of the methodology here. So wherever that team ranked in the blue blood ranking, and the perception, that's the recruit perception, and the
Right.
recruiting based on the talent composite financially based on the graph I showed you and the viewership wise from 1 to 19. I just looked at each one of those schools and then looked at the average of each one to get the entire stack ranking. And Florida State ends up showing as the fifth most valuable brand wise in the Big Ten. And oddly enough, they scored the same as Oregon.
Right. Right.
That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
they'd be a little bit behind USC, but they were basically on par brand wise with Oregon. And Michigan State again, like right there at that median point where you're saying, hey, if you're in the top 9 of this graph, then you're going to be an above average brand. And if you're below, you're going to be considered a below average brand for the average Big Ten school. So based on the analysis we're looking at, based on these 5 points, Florida State is a no brainer brand wise
Oh,
for the
yeah.
Big Ten. There's also different things they bring to the table, as we know, new geography, new recruiting footprint, the new matchups and everything. So there's so much that Florida State brings to the Big Ten conference that they really are a no-brainer add for the Big Ten. If if the SEC doesn't come calling and grabbing them first or anything. So if the Big Ten has a chance to go after the Knowles and get that done, if the Knowles can wiggle their way out of the ACC like they're trying to do, this is
Right.
a great fit in every way you look at it. And it's poised for even more growth and to be even better fit and a stronger brand down the line in the Big Ten. So, yeah, I mean, it's really illustrating that go ahead, Big
I,
Ten, and go after these Knowles.
it's impressive, the
Yeah.
data, right? The data
Mhm.
justifies what we intrinsically see and what we've known about all these schools. I can't, except for the couple aberrations. I don't understand Nebraska. That doesn't make any sense to me. UCLA, again, boggles my mind. I guess it's just because it's LA, so they bring a lot of eyeballs there. But everybody else, I think, is about where I would put them. I think this is really, boy, this analysis is fantastic, you.
Yeah, this one was a fun one to look at. And I think that these 5 points are pretty close to really, what a brand is. There's
Right,
nothing conclusive with that, so everyone has to use their own discernment and judge what they're gonna measure based off of, and
right.
these 5 points to me were the biggest 5 points, and I think that we're really close to, really showing you exactly how it is. Like, this is more of the reality of really where Florida State matches up and everything, and so and everyone kind of intuitively knew that Florida State was probably a good fit anyway, but this just points out that yeah, they certainly are. And so you go after them and you add that market and like yeah, you go after and try to recruit better in Florida and bring more Florida recruits. And there's some other things outside of just the brand that they bring to the table. So get it
So I
done,
think
guys.
what this says is that Florida State deserves a full share. I
Yeah, no
think
doubt
that's
about
what
it.
this says.
Florida
Oregon and
State.
Washington were not on the same page as Florida State.
No, yeah, like in Oregon, you can see here brand wise what they bring to the table, like financially. Brand wise, are really similar to Florida State, but like Washington's a little pegged down. I mean, Washington
Right.
academically brought a little bit more than Oregon did, but Oregon's brand is a bigger brand football wise than Washington's. At least going into this last season, everything, I would still say that's the case too.
Right.
Oregon's is. But I think Florida State, based on the growth potential and everything's even slightly better than Oregon. If you know, you got to face those two up. So yeah, bring a ton.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and for all those Knoll fans that have become fans of our show, and all the Jen and Vince and Ryan, Renegade Report, they're going to love this data, right? They're going to be able to sit on it and basically say, look at us, right? We are somebody, and I just think it confirms what most of us already knew.
Absolutely. So, hey, Yell, thanks for attending this session of Wild U University. Hopefully, it added some value to you. If it did, give us a like on the video. Any comments below? We'll respond to them and consider your thoughts and points. And then thanks for tuning in, y'all.
Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. See you later. Peace out.
Go use.